How can you have a true all-season tyre that's got the Three Peaks Mountain Snowflake logo, which is a certification for snow performance? How is that also very good at performing in the summer months? Logically, in my head, this summer tyre isn't very good in winter, and it's not. Just as this winter tyre here isn't any good in summer. They are optimised for different things. So, in my head again, I'm thinking an all-season tyre must have a significant compromise. You can't have your cake and eat it, so how can you have all-season performance, both in the snow and in the wet and in the dry and in the hot weather? How can you have all this? What's the basic engineering principles behind it? For the last 10 years-ish, I've used all-season Michelin Crossclimate tyres, the first generation and then the second generation. I've probably done at least 150,000 miles on those tyres, bought with my own money, but now there's a new generation of Crossclimate, the Crossclimate 3 tyres. I, just to be open, am now working with Michelin. So I've used these for 10 years, but over the last few months, I've got access to their engineering knowledge, their designers, their product specialists. And I've done hundreds of miles on those Crossclimate 3 tyres and the new variant, the Crossclimate 3 Sport. I'll tell you the difference between those two nearer the end of the video. But in this, I want to basically delve into the basic principles behind tyre design and how you can have an all-season tyre that has no real compromises. There are two basic principles that I want to concentrate on when it comes to tyres in this video, and I've really dumbed it down so I can understand it. And the two things are compounds, so that's what the tyre's made from, and tread features. As you can see, between these winter and summer tyres, they're very different. So let's start with the compounds, what the tyres are made from. There's something called glass transition temperature, which essentially means that as a compound gets colder, it gets harder, like glass, and in tyre speak, it becomes less effective, it becomes stiffer, and it loses some of its capabilities. So essentially, this summer tyre is designed to operate in warmer temperatures. When it's operating in sub-zero temperatures, for example, then the compound gets harder and, well, that's not great for performance. Whereas the winter compounds, they're designed to operate at lower temperatures and the compounds are more flexible and you get the features of the treads because they've still got that flexibility. If it gets too hot, if it gets too warm, the winter tyre will be too soft and again, too flexible, it will wear quicker, and ultimately that's why you have a difference between summer and winter compounds. Enter the all-season tyre, and in the UK, with the less extreme weather, this is perfect for us. But, very basically put, the compound of the Crossclimate 3s and the previous generations before them are essentially closer to that of a winter tyre than they are a summer tyre. Now let's move on to the tread features. And as I said earlier, these are very different between the summer and the winter tyre, let alone the Crossclimate all-season tyre, which again are quite unique. So as you can see, with this summer tyre, we have very few cuts or sipes, whereas the winter tyre has got lots of sipes because it needs to be flexible, it needs to dig into that snow. So if I'm using my hands as an example, lots of these cuts or sipes would be like me digging away with my hands like a claw into the snow, whereas the summer tyre would be like punching at the snow. I'm not going to get very far. And these longitudinal grooves, which is easy for you to say, and lack of sipes are what traditionally summer tyres will have. Very, very simply put, the tread features of the Crossclimate tyres, all generations, are closer to that of a summer tyre than a winter tyre. But the compounds that they're made from are closer to that of a winter tyre than a summer tyre. So essentially, we end up meeting somewhere in the middle. But it doesn't end there. There's some other clever features which make this a relatively unique tyre, certainly when it launched, which means it's usually at the top of the charts. Tyres like this often have square contact patches, so that's going to be flat in contact with the ground, whereas the Crossclimate 3s and previous generations have a more rounded contact patch. The tread pattern, as you can see in this terrible example here, displaces the water whilst you're driving through heavy rain, but the rounded contact patch means that it also aids in getting rid of any water and preventing aquaplaning. Ultimately, yes, this tyre in its correct optimised operational temperature and environment will be better than an all-season tyre, just like this winter tyre in winter will be better than an all-season tyre. But you have to swap the tyres around twice a year, you have to store them somewhere, which we luckily enough do have. For the UK, once more, which this is a very UK-centric video, with our dull weather, an all-season tyre will be perfect, because the absolute extremes that these will beat it at, we very, very rarely have. If it snows here, then usually people just don't go to work for the 1 or 2 days of the year that it does get to that level, and where you just stay at home, don't you? Now I want to talk about why you end up typically paying more for a premium tyre such as a Michelin one compared to unknown brand number 1. Well, let's look at the tread features again. These are all, and the Crossclimates as well, 100% depth tread features. So everything we've just talked about in terms of the sipes and the different tread features, you will get that throughout the entire life of the tyre. So right down to the legal limit, you've got all the tread features that you had when the tyre was new. So that means that the tooling that Michelin use, it not only has lots more thinner sipes or cuts in the tyre, which means the tooling needs replacing more often, but the fact it has to go full depth, again, it makes it more expensive to make because the tooling has greater stresses and ultimately is more expensive to maintain and therefore more expensive to produce the tyre. Another factor, and this is something I'm very privileged to have seen recently, is the R&D that goes behind the tyres. So this is just one tiny part of the whole system. I was recently at the MotoGP and it was fantastic, and again, really privileged to be there, but part of being there was seeing the Michelin workshop. So this is essentially where Michelin provide the tyres for the riders and the teams that are racing, and then they go out and do their thing, and then all of those tyres, every single one of them, comes back to Michelin. They then get analysed and studied, and bear in mind these will be under extreme racing stress. They will get studied to see if they can improve the compound, improve the tread depths and features and various other stuff. And that alone isn't just because you see the Michelin logos on your TV when you're watching a race. It's because it provides a huge amount of data to go into the R&D for new tyres, like Formula 1, stuff that's developed for a Formula 1 car to make it as quickly or as efficiently as possible around a track, that then trickles down into our cars eventually. So that's again another reason why you typically end up paying more for a premium tyre over the cheap stuff. Most tyres, if not all tyre reviews or tests, are done when the tyre's like this, brand new. So you've got all the tread features. So a cheap tyre that wears down and loses half of its features will perform much better when it's brand new as opposed to when it's, well, nearly fully worn. This for me I see as a huge advantage with a premium tyre like the Michelin's, because I want the same tread features when it's near the legal limit as I do when it was brand new. They are very much a false economy, our cheap tyres, and I say this time and time again, not just because they don't last as long. This should last a lot longer than, again, a cheap unknown brand. So the longevity is enough for me, but those tread features, that is a big part, because again, most tyres are tested when they're brand new, not when they're fully worn. Now I know that tyre videos typically don't do that well on the channel, but as a certified tyre nerd, me spending time with the Michelin product specialists and poking at their brains for all this knowledge, I'm like a pig in their houses. Now I said earlier I was going to mention the difference between the Crossclimate 3s and the Crossclimate 3 Sports in terms of how they differ. I'll be honest, before I turned up in Switzerland and did hundreds of miles on all types of tyres in different cars, on different roads in the mountains and down below near the lakes, I thought, well, they've probably just changed the tread pattern a little bit to make it grippier and called it the Sport. Boy, was I wrong. So the best way of putting this is think of the Crossclimate 3s, the standard version, of an evolution of the 2s, an upgrade if you will, a midlife facelift. You go from the Golf Mark 8 to the Mark 8.5 for example, and they've looked at stuff and improved on it in every category. That's essentially the Crossclimate 3 in a nutshell. The Crossclimate 3 Sport, that's next level compound stuff. That's real next gen compounds and tyre treads, and they've put so much effort into it. It's a completely different tyre. This is the best compliment I could say to it. We drove for a few hundred miles in sporty cars, shall we say, had some fun, and ultimately, if nobody told me what tyres were on that car, if they said after the fact, what sort of genre of tyre were you driving on then? You know, don't look, what were you on? I would have probably said, Pilot Sport 4s or 5s. I genuinely couldn't feel the difference. I thought I was on some sports tyres on that sportier car when I was on all-season Crossclimate 3 Sports. That is for me, again, the best compliment, because that's exactly what they were aiming for. It feels like a sports tyre, but ultimately you've got the all-season capabilities. Yes, I'm working with Michelin. It's always with a pinch of salt. Look at the independent reviews. Just go and look at it. I don't need to say anything. It's all in there. So once again, for the last 20 years I've used Michelin tyres. Nothing has changed. Even if I wasn't working with them, I would still be saying the same thing I have said today. Crossclimate 3s now have become my next step in terms of what I recommend to people. And although it's going to be a while for all sizes to come out, if you've got the availability for your car for those tyres, then absolutely you can't go wrong. So once more, thank you ever so much to Michelin for supporting the channel. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you find it interesting. I genuinely do, because I do, and I just want to try and pass that knowledge on in terms of why I say, and I've always said this same thing. Tyres are one of the most, if not the most important part of a car. It's what contacts you to the road. Don't cheap out on it. Tyres are often a distressed purchase, something people don't want or like doing, and then get surprised when all of a sudden someone says, you need a new tyre. I look at it very much the opposite. I'm like, brilliant, what can I get? How can I improve my efficiency, my ride, my handling, my performance in many different ways? Don't forget about the Driving Home podcast. That is back in the usual podcasty places, and if you look in the description of every video I've done, there's a link to the second channel where the Driving Home podcast sits. And of course, members for 99p a month can get videos on Sunday instead of Friday, helping the channel out. 99p a month. You can pay more if you think it's worth more, or you can just pay less than £1, which these days doesn't get you much, but it does get you the membership. So once more, thank you ever so much for watching. I'll see you soon, and let me know if you're still watching it at this stage by typing the word in treadwear. Then I know you've been watching right to the end.